Well, we're Strata Design, we're landscape architects, and today we'll be showing you one of our roof garden projects that we've got on the UK. So if you'd like to follow me through this portal here, then I will see you on the other side. Yeah, no, it's does bring the space alive somewhat, and it is quite good sort of being able to talk with the background chatter. It just makes it a little less two-dimensional.
I love that.
Okay, so I'll get started. So as I said, we are Strata Design, we're landscape architects. My name is Matthew Willmott. So got our founder Richard here with us, and Thea, who's our product designer. This is a selection of projects that we've sort of done recently. If you're wondering what a landscape architect is, we sort of do the bits around buildings. So we do the planting, surfacing, the sort of arrangement of the space. And in this instance, we also do the bits on top of the building. So today, the title is Landscape Architecture in the Metaverse, Virtual Placemaking for Real Projects. And the project that you're currently stood on is the staff roof garden for Princess Anne Hospital, which is part of the University Hospital Southampton estate. Our client for this is Southampton Hospital Charity, as the project is funded by a charitable donation, which came to the sum of £17 million. I mean, the donor wished to remain anonymous, but we're all very grateful for the money they donated. It's going to change an awful lot of lives at the hospital. So Southampton is on the south coast of England, part of the United Kingdom. It's down here. And what you're looking at here is the University Hospital Southampton estate, which I think has about 14 or 15,000 staff members working there. I mean, as you can see, sort of roof space isn't terribly well utilised at the moment. And they do have solar panels on this building here, but there is scope to do stuff with the roofs. This building highlighted in red is the Princess Anne Hospital. So coming in, I mean, again, at current, there's no real use of it other than for sort of plant and skylights. I mean, initially the project was supposed to go on this roof here, but it was subsequently moved to this space here. So I think you should be able to identify the lift core that's behind you, the access bridge that comes over, and finally we're stood in this area here. Here's a few pictures of the, this is from ground level, this is the main entrance. This is where we are now. Yeah, it's not a very nice place as it is at the moment. It's not accessible to staff. There's no biodiversity value. So this is what this project aims to change. Very briefly, this is our sort of workflow. Revit is what we use to produce all our construction documentation. You know, it's a sort of architecture, engineering, construction industry sort of stalwart. So from there, we export to Blender, which anyone who's sort of tried creating spatial spaces will be familiar with. That's where we do a lot of sort of cleaning up meshes, assigning materials, making it ready to go into Unity. So the first time we sort of created this space, they hadn't released access to these spatial creator toolkit. So we were exporting GLBs straight from Blender into spatial. But I mean, unfortunately, that doesn't tend to look very good. But fortunately, when they did release access to the creator toolkit, we can import everything into Unity and start introducing more game-like elements, sort of bake light maps, so we get a much higher fidelity on the roof garden. And finally, once we've done all of our prep, it's into spatial, where we are now. So this is a steelwork model. One of the big challenges that we faced on this project is the loading on the roofs. So we had to work to 150 kilograms a square meter, which doesn't allow you to do very much. It's, you know, sort of 100 millimeters of soil, which is enough for wildflowers just about, but not sufficient for what we're currently seeing. So the engineer's solution is to create a steel frame that then sends the load down through structural columns, the existing structural columns of the building. And what that allows us to do is, you know, work to a loading of, you know, we're up to 600 kilos, I think, in places. So having that weight restriction removed allows us to put much bigger planting, the trees that you see, and, you know, sort of general furniture. So from there we go into Blender. These photos just show some of the processes that were followed to sort of add things to the space. So the cafe kiosk, it's just all the UV editing, assigning materials. This is a very simple bird model with an armature and, you know, a sort of simple flapping animation. And once there's a lot of back and forth between Blender and Unity when you realise things aren't quite set up properly. But eventually you arrive in Unity, and this is where you can start assigning, you know, here you see the seating hotspots that are assigned to all the seating in the space. So if you were to click on any of the chairs, the benches, you can sort of sit down. Also see B, for instance, which has got a trigger on it for the audio source. If you get too close to the Bs, they sort of buzz. Yeah, and so eventually we end up with the spatial model, which we're all stood in. And yeah. So in terms of how we have used this in professional practice, initially it was a sort of design critique tool. So as we were creating the design, we can walk around in it, we can see how the proportions work, you know, just get a feel for the space. We undertook that process with the project manager at the hospital estate. So we could show the client, you know, this is what we're thinking in this moment of time. And we got a lot of feedback from that, which we can then use to improve the design. We didn't arrive at this design the first time through. As design is always an iterative process, but having a tool like this really is invaluable for just making sure that it works. I think design to two-dimensional plans, you are unlikely to end up with as good a result unless if you're not using tools like this. It's also a way to share the project with people who would normally never get to experience it like this. The roof garden itself will be staff only. So that was part of the conditions of the donation, that for their work through the pandemic and the current condition of amenity space for the staff, extremely limited. So as I said, this is conditioned to be only for staff use, which means it's quite difficult to share it with anyone. But I think, here with Spatial, we can invite people from across the world just to see how the project is, maybe learn from it, or otherwise be inspired by it, and that's unusual. So, I mean, have I missed anything, Richard? Is there anything you'd like to say about the model, Spatial?
I don't think so. That's a pretty good summary. I quite like the way the bird sort of zaps through the screen.
It just avoiding
It's
the
a
screen.
nice touch.
That's a great path. Pathing on the bird.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the other advantages of Unity, that we can introduce things like bees, birds. There's all the interactivity that Spatial introducing or has introduced that we can introduce to our own spaces. I mean, it's a cliche to say it brings it to life, but I think it's exactly that.
Well, I mean, it's
I think as soon as we added them,
all the planting is chosen to one extent or another for the value it provides to wildlife, whether that's sort of pollen for bees, pollen for pollinators, or nesting opportunities for birds. I mean, if you'd like to follow me this way.
Sure.
Towards the rear of the space, to this fire escape here. And this is a what's called a biodiverse roof. So there's no structural framing on this bit because we've got a sort of about 100 millimeters of soil, and this is effectively fenced off so that it can serve as habitat for wildlife without human intrusion. And it's quite an interesting juxtaposition with the garden next to it, which very much is about staff being able to come sit down in their breaks.
I mean, the hospital itself has a green plan strategy. This is tied in quite closely to that. They have targets for biodiversity provision. So it's a concept that we're kind of hoping to roll out across the hospital estate. They have a lot of roof space that could make a massive difference to the levels of wildlife within the estate and habitat for it.
Do you guys consider having any fruits or vegetables of edible landscaping?
It was considered. I mean, the concept of sort of rooftop agriculture is fantastic. But I think on this scheme we decided that it wasn't necessarily appropriate because I mean the workloads that the staff are under. I think rooftop agriculture works best where there's there will be people like residents, for instance, to look after it. Whereas here, it's not as certain that it will get looked after.
It's been designed to be low maintenance, essentially.
I mean, all of the planting on the biodiverse roof will be sort of native, and I think where possible, we also, a lot of the trees, for instance, should all be either native or naturalized.
Besides the direct client, did you bring any other workers into the virtual space? Before you're going to start construction.
Yeah, we've sent we've had the contractor sort of looking around it. I mean, we're not shy of sending the link to people. We do think this is quite a good thing, and it's, as you say, it's extremely useful showing this to the people who will be building it. I mean, it's also one of the biggest problems we face is that a process we call value engineering, where if we're running over budget, then things have to be cut to bring a figure within the acceptable range. And I think people are much more reluctant to cut when they've experienced something like this. Because I think if people like what they see, they start taking ownership of it. It's something to sort of protect.
They start getting emotionally attached to the space even before it's real.
Yeah, exactly.
That's quite interesting.
Which is a useful thing in the construction industry.
Yeah, I mean, a VE exercise at its best is value engineering, but if you're not careful, you get all the quality stripped out, and often people don't really understand what you're proposing anyway, if it's just based on drawings. But this space is obviously a lot more kind of engaging. You get much better buy-in from the client, we find.
So it's this portal right here under the presentation screen. And before we do that, give a round of applause for Matthew.
Very much, Nick and Ryan.
How do we get to the space in the future, Matthew?
Well, if you click the heart icon in the top, there's a little heart icon. It will save it to your recents.
Perfect.
So when you're on the sort of spatial homepage, you can navigate to your recent, and everything you've liked will show up there.
All right.